Do you think you'll ever be Queen?
No, I don't. No.
The story begins with voices that once lived closest to Diana, the people who saw behind the polished royal image and understood the quiet storm she carried. Their memories of her are not the fairy tale lines the world loved, but the chilling confessions she shared in private.
You know, Simon, I'm not going to make old bones. She knew that she was going to die young.
They recall how Diana would quietly say she didn't expect to grow old, how she felt a shadow hanging over her life, how she believed forces far larger than her were shaping a fate she could not escape.
She said to me, William would adapt himself if something happens, because she had the premonition she would be killed or die, or not in a natural way. And said, William would adapt himself to the systems, but I'm worried about Harry, because Harry is more susceptible to things, and he would suffer a lot if I leave this world.
Oni set the tone for everything that follows, a reminder that for Diana, fear was not paranoia. Prophecy. They remembered her saying harm was always one step behind her, that she felt watched, manipulated, and pushed into a corner she knew she wouldn't survive. Before the flash of cameras, before the smoke of the tunnel, before the headlines that shattered a generation, Diana herself had already spoken the first chapter of her own ending. In her own voice, Diana often revealed a truth far darker than anyone wanted to believe.
Do you think you'll ever be Queen?
No, I don't. No.
Why do you think that?
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. But I don't see myself being queen of this country. I don't think many people would want me to be queen. Actually, when I say many people, I mean the establishment that I'm married into, because they've decided that I'm a non-starter.
Why do you think they've decided that?
Because I do things differently, because I don't go by a rule book, because I lead from the heart, not the head. And albeit that's got me into trouble in my work, I understand that. But someone's got to go out there and love people and show it.
There was something in her tone, soft, almost resigned, that made those words linger long after the cameras turned off. Behind closed doors, she confided to trusted friends that she felt surrounded by danger, as if every step she took was being watched and weighed by people who wished she would simply disappear. She described the palace walls not as protection but as a cage, one with doors controlled by those who never forgave her for breaking the rules of silence. And when you listen to her speak, when you hear the tremble hidden beneath her composure, it becomes impossible to dismiss her words as dramatics. These were not frightened imaginations, they were warnings. She spoke of feeling unsafe in cars, of believing a staged accident would be used to silence her, of sensing that she had stepped into a game she was never meant to win. Every clip of her voice added to the puzzle. Her fear of surveillance, her certainty that forces around her were tightening their grip, her quiet acceptance that something was coming. As the footage plays, her expressions tell the rest of the story. A woman trying to stay brave while knowing the future she feared was getting closer. Her tone, her pauses, her eyes, they all reveal a truth she understood before anyone else. For Diana, danger wasn't a rumor that IT was her shadow. The most haunting piece of Diana's fears came in the form of a handwritten letter, one she penned months before her death, a note that reads today like a prophecy carved into paper. In it, she wrote that someone was planning an accident in her car, one designed to feel sudden and tragic, but crafted with careful intent. She described brake failure and a serious head injury, writing that this was part of a larger plan to remove her quietly from the royal equation. When she handed this letter to her trusted butler, it wasn't in a moment of panic. It was in a moment of clarity. She wanted someone to know, someone who could later say that she felt this coming long before it happened. Her solicitor later recorded a similar conversation, where she repeated her fear of a staged crash.
They see me as a threat of some kind.
Even the police officer she spoke to admitted he half believed her. At the time, many dismissed her concerns as exaggerations fueled by stress. But after the events of Paris, those words took on a weight that could no longer be ignored. When the world learned how she died, inside a car, in a tunnel, struck by forces still debated today. Her letter became one of the most unsettling pieces of evidence that her fears were not fantasies. They were predictions, and every time her words are read, they echo with the same question. How did she describe the method of her death before it happened? It is a question that still hangs over every investigation, every documentary, every whisper of conspiracy. Because Diana didn't just fear the crash, she foresaw it. After the collapse of her marriage, Diana stepped out of the royal structure with a public smile and a private storm still brewing around her. Freedom, in theory, should have brought her peace. Instead, it exposed her to a world where she felt more vulnerable than ever. She was no longer protected by the automatic machinery of the palace, yet she remained under the same relentless spotlight, followed by cameras, judged by headlines, and haunted by whispers from behind gilded doors. Friends recall how she tried to reinvent her life, dedicating herself to humanitarian work, building her identity outside the monarchy, and learning to breathe again after years of emotional suffocation. But even as she embraced her independence, the sense of looming danger never left her. She would mention late-night phone calls, strange behavior from those assigned to watch over her, and moments where she felt trapped between public expectations and private battles. She knew she had angered powerful people by speaking openly about her pain, her marriage, and the pressures of royal life. She knew she had stepped outside the carefully drawn lines that generations of royals had never dared to cross. And with every boundary she shattered, she felt the invisible tension tighten around her. Those close to her said she seemed to be racing against time, changing her life, finding new love, and reclaiming her voice as if she sensed her window was closing. There was a sharpness in her urgency, a determination mixed with fear. She wanted to live freely, but she also spoke as if she was running out of road. And so, even in her brightest moments of independence, the shadow followed her. She was no longer the young bride stepping into a fairy tale. She was a woman aware of the silent war around her. That final summer, Diana tried to rewrite her story. Far from the cold formality of royal life, she spent warm, sunlit days in the south of France with Dodi Fayed, a man who offered her comfort, excitement, and a world untouched by palace rules. On the deck of the Jonical yacht, she laughed more freely, allowed herself to relax, and seemed, for the first time in years, genuinely at ease. But even in those tender moments, the world was watching. Every photograph of them together set off waves of speculation. Every headline hinted at an engagement. And behind the scenes, Diana understood that her relationship with Dodi had the power to rattle the most influential people in Britain. Here she was, the mother of a future king, falling in love with the son of a man long despised by the establishment. That combination was explosive. As their romance deepened, the attention around them intensified. Paparazzi followed them everywhere, capturing stolen smiles, quiet moments, and affectionate gestures that fed the global frenzy. For Diana, the pressure was familiar, but now it felt sharper, more suffocating. Friends say she knew the impact her relationship would have, the political implications, the social backlash, the discomfort it stirred among those who once controlled her life. Yet she didn't hide it. She held Dodi's hand openly, dipped into the Mediterranean with him, let the cameras see her happiness. There was a defiance in the way she carried herself, as if she were reclaiming the joy she'd been denied for years. Still, beneath that newfound brightness, she confided that the danger she had always felt was creeping closer. She mentioned strange encounters with press boats, unusual movements around the yacht, and a rising fear that the walls she'd escaped were trying to tighten around her again. And as the summer drew to an end, the sense that something irreversible was approaching seemed to follow her everywhere. It was a season painted in gold by the sun, yet edged with a shadow she couldn't ignore. When Diana and Dodi arrived in Paris on August 30th, it felt like the beginning of an ordinary, elegant night. One more stop in a summer that had carried them through glittering coastlines and quiet corners of Europe. The airport cameras captured their arrival, the soft smiles they exchanged, and the ease between them that suggested nothing more than a couple enjoying their evening. Yet those recordings would become the last images of Diana alive outside a hotel. As they stepped into the city, the mood seemed calm but watched. Paparazzi had already gathered, sensing a story before it unfolded. tracking every movement from the airport to the Ritz. Inside the hotel, the atmosphere shifted. The Ritz cameras filmed their steps, their gestures, their conversations, routine moments that would later be studied frame by frame, as if each blink held an answer. Witnesses recalled how in love they looked, walking side by side through the grand lobby, not knowing the weight history would place on those simple gestures. Diana appeared relaxed in the footage, her posture easy, her smile soft, showing no sign that danger was closing in. She greeted staff politely, moved through hallways with calm familiarity, and carried herself like someone expecting nothing more than a peaceful night in Paris. What makes these hours so haunting is how normal they appear. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look anxious. If the shadows she feared were following her that night, there was no trace of it in her expression. Even Dodi seemed at ease, moving between the suite and the hotel corridors, preparing for a dinner they would never attend. The cameras show moments of closeness, hands brushing, quiet conversations, gentle laughter that echoes across the footage today like memories suspended in air. One image in particular stands out: Diana and Dodi walking toward the service lift, fingers intertwined, unaware that the clock was counting down their final hours. It was a love story carried through a city glowing with midnight lights. But beneath that glow, decisions were already being made. Plans were shifting, and a chain of events was about to begin, one that neither of them could see coming. Paris welcomed them like any other couple in love. But in the quiet corners of the Ritz, the last chapter of Diana's life was quietly opening. In the hours before everything unraveled, 3 details inside the Ritz became the core of the mystery: the ring Dodi purchased, the getaway plan he arranged, and the strange, unaccounted-for period in Henri Paul's movements. Earlier that evening, Dodi slipped out to Raphael's jeweler and returned with a brochure, a quiet gesture hinting at something more serious. A hotel manager later collected 2 rings from the shop, one of them a simple gold band that many believe was meant for Diana. Whether it was an engagement ring or a symbolic promise, the debate still burns today. But the intention behind it added a new layer of intensity to their final night. While Dodi floated between the suite and the hotel corridors, Henri Paul was suddenly summoned back to duty. He arrived quickly, slipping through the lobby with his usual air of confidence. But what happened in the hours before that call remains one of the great unanswered questions. There is a gap, nearly 3 hours, where no one can say with certainty where he was or who he spoke to. Footage shows him moving calmly, joking with staff, and walking steadily, hardly matching the image of a man later claimed to be heavily intoxicated. Meanwhile, behind the closed doors of the Imperial Suite, the couple tried to decide how to escape the crowd outside. Dodi worked out a plan involving decoy cars and a discreet exit from the back of the hotel, a plan that felt clever in theory but dangerous in execution. His bodyguards disagreed, sensing flaws, sensing risk, yet the decision was made. A single Mercedes would carry Diana and Dodi through the Paris night, driven by a man whose last hours were already fogged with confusion and contradiction. This moment inside the Ritz, one ring, one plan, one driver, became the hinge on which history would turn, setting in motion the final journey that would lead them into the Alma Tunnel. Inside the Ritz, the final 12 hours of Diana's life unfold like a silent documentary captured by dozens of cameras that had no idea they were recording history. The footage shows a woman far from the chaos her future would ignite. Diana moves through the halls with a softness that feels almost protective to watch, unaware that these moments would later be replayed by investigators, journalists, and millions around the world searching for hidden signs. She arrives at the Imperial Suite with Dodi, sharing quiet conversations, leaning close, laughing in small bursts that now feel painfully fragile. The cameras catch them entering lifts, walking down corridors, pausing at doorways, all the normal rhythms of a private evening that should have ended in peace. What makes this timeline so gripping is how human it is. There is no trace of the doom she once feared. Instead, she looks playful, tapping Dodi lightly, teasing him, holding hands with him as they move between rooms. At one point, she waits near the service lift, her arm intertwined with his, their fingers laced behind her back as if they were 2 people escaping the world for a night. These small gestures reveal closeness, comfort, and a quiet intimacy the public rarely saw. Meanwhile, the hotel's corridors grow busier. Staff move in and out. Bodyguards gather outside the suite. And Henri Paul appears in the frame repeatedly, sometimes alone, sometimes talking with photographers just outside the doors, sometimes laughing in the bar. His behavior is calm, controlled, shockingly ordinary despite later claims about his condition. The cameras record each moment with clinical clarity. The shoelaces he ties, the brief conversations he has, the steady steps he takes through the marble lobby. These details would later become evidence, dissected and compared against the official narrative of intoxication. But within the footage, there is no chaos, no disorder, only routine. The most striking part of these hours is the stillness before the storm. Diana's last recorded smile flashes across the screen, a quick, gentle expression that lingers for less than a second. In hindsight, it feels like a goodbye no one expected. The cameras weren't meant to witness her final chapter, yet they captured it anyway, preserving the last glimpses of a woman who believed danger walked beside her. And in these quiet, unguarded moments, she looks more alive than ever. As midnight crept over Paris, the calm inside the Ritz shifted into hurried coordination. Plans were changing, voices grew sharper, and decisions were being made with a sense of urgency that now feels like the final turn toward disaster. The decoy strategy was simple on paper. Send 2 cars out the front to draw the paparazzi, while Diana and Dodi quietly slipped out the back in a single Mercedes. But behind this simplicity was a storm of tension. Bodyguards warned the plan was unsafe. They insisted that leaving with only one security officer and a driver in questionable condition was far too risky. Yet their objections fell away as the clock ticked on. At the center of it all was Henri Paul, moving between the service exit and the paparazzi waiting outside, stepping in and out of the hotel as if juggling 2 worlds at once. The footage shows him waving at photographers, exchanging words with drivers, and appearing strangely confident about the escape route. Whether he was reassuring them or being reassured remains one of the biggest questions of that night. Meanwhile, upstairs, Diana and Dodi prepared to leave. As they walked toward the service lift, Diana looked lighthearted, exchanging playful gestures with Dodi, their fingers brushing, their hands linking for the last time on camera. She didn't know the danger her own instincts had predicted was now minutes away. At 12:19 a.m., the Mercedes pulled up at the back entrance. The doorway was narrow, dimly lit, almost hidden from the world. Diana shielded her eyes from the sudden glare of cameras that had still found their way to the rear. Dodi followed close behind, stepping into the car with trust rather than hesitation. Henri Paul slid into the driver's seat. Trevor Rees-Jones, the lone bodyguard, took his place in the front passenger seat. And just like that, the decision was sealed. The decoy cars burst from the front of the hotel, instantly dragging photographers into a chase. But within seconds, the paparazzi realized they had been tricked. Wheels screeched, engines roared, motorbikes swung sharply toward the back street. The Mercedes carrying Diana and Dodi rolled forward into the Paris night, gaining only a few seconds before the storm caught up. It was a plan born out of desperation for privacy, but it pushed them straight into the path of their fate. In those last moments before the chase began, no one inside that car could have imagined that they had just stepped into history. When the chaos inside the tunnel settled into a terrible stillness, the first person to reach Diana was not a paramedic or police officer, but a passing doctor named Dr. Mayles who happened to be driving home. He saw the smoke, the crumpled Mercedes, and the figures frozen around it. Unsure of what to do, as he approached the wreckage, he found Diana still alive, struggling to breathe, pinned inside the twisted frame of the car. Her pulse was faint but present, her eyes opening and closing as if fighting to stay conscious. Around her, cameras clicked, voices shouted, and confusion echoed through the tunnel, but none of it touched the calm urgency of the doctor trying to stabilize her in the dim flicker of tunnel lights. French emergency services arrived quickly, following their strict protocol. Treat as much as possible at the scene before moving the patient. It was a system designed to save lives. But in Diana's case, it also meant time, long, slipping minutes that would later become a point of global debate. Paramedics worked to free her from the wreckage, inserting tubes, checking her heartbeat, trying to control internal bleeding they couldn't yet see. She was still conscious at moments, whispering faintly, asking about the others, unaware that Dodi and Henri Paul were already gone. Every breath she took was fragile, every second heavy with the realization that her injuries were far more severe than anyone first understood. When they finally lifted her into the ambulance, nearly an hour had passed since the crash. Instead of heading to the nearest hospital, they followed protocol and redirected to La Petite-Salpêtrière, a larger facility equipped for critical trauma. The journey was slow, deliberately slow, because Diana's condition was unstable, her blood pressure collapsing with each movement. Sirens echoed through the Paris streets as the ambulance crept through the night, balancing speed with survival. But by the time she reached the operating room, her heart was already failing. Surgeons fought for nearly 2 hours to revive her, working against injuries so devastating that even the best efforts could not turn the tide. At 4 a.m., the news the world hoped never to hear became reality. Princess Diana was gone. Outside the hospital, the crowd grew silently, some crying, some in disbelief, as though the night had played a cruel trick. Reporters who had chased her every day now stood still. People who loved her from afar felt the world shift under their feet. And inside that surgical room, the fight for Diana's life ended in the same city that had witnessed her last moments of hope, fear, and quiet love. The attempt to save her was real and desperate, but fate had already made its choice deep inside the Alma Tunnel. In the days that followed, attention shifted sharply toward one man, Henri Paul, the driver of the Mercedes. Almost immediately, he was painted as the sole villain, the drunk driver responsible for the crash that ended Diana's life. Headlines around the world repeated the same story. He was heavily intoxicated, reckless, and unfit to drive. But as investigations deepened, contradictions began to surface, turning Henri Paul from a convenient explanation into one of the most puzzling figures of the entire tragedy. CCTV footage from the Ritz shows him walking steadily, tying his shoelaces with perfect balance, chatting calmly with staff, and moving without a single sign of impairment. Witnesses who interacted with him that night insisted he showed no slurred speech, no staggering, no unusual behavior. Even the bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, who sat directly beside him in the car, later said he smelled no alcohol on Paul's breath. Yet blood tests conducted after the crash reported alarmingly high alcohol levels, so high they suggested a level of drunkenness completely impossible to reconcile with his behavior on camera. The discrepancy raised a storm of suspicion. Could the samples have been mixed up? Was evidence tampered with? Why were the readings so extreme when everything recorded of Paul's actions showed the opposite? The coroner flagged this conflict as a major issue, acknowledging that if the jury rejected the idea that Henri Paul was too intoxicated to drive, every official conclusion up to that point would collapse under scrutiny. Adding to the confusion was Paul's rumored connection to intelligence services. While French officials admitted he occasionally provided information from hotel circles, British agencies insisted he had no involvement with them. Still, the gap of nearly 3 hours where his movements were unaccounted for remains a hole in the timeline that no inquiry has ever fully explained. Was he meeting someone, receiving instructions, or simply off duty, living an ordinary evening the cameras didn't capture? The narrative around Henri Paul became a battleground between those who believed he was a scapegoat and those who believed he was genuinely responsible. Some saw him as a loyal employee caught in circumstances far beyond his control. Others claimed he was part of a larger, darker plan. Regardless of the theory, one truth remains. He died before he could speak for himself. And because of that, every question about his role hangs in the air unanswered. Whether he was a convenient villain or an innocent man, Henri Paul remains one of the most mysterious and controversial pieces of the puzzle. As investigators dug deeper, another shadow fell across the case. The suspicion that intelligence agencies might have been monitoring Diana more closely than anyone admitted. Rumors had swirled for years that both British and foreign services kept tabs on her movements, her relationships, and even her private conversations. Henri Paul's known connection with French intelligence added fuel to the fire, while officials insisted he merely passed along routine hotel-related information. The idea that a man steering Diana's final journey had any link to intelligence work made the public uneasy. British authorities pushed back hard, saying they had searched their files exhaustively and found no evidence of MI5 or MI6 involvement. They emphasized that they were given unprecedented access to intelligence records, a rare move meant to silence conspiracy claims. Still, gaps remained. There were inconsistencies that no report fully erased. Witnesses came forward saying they believed Diana was under surveillance. Others claimed they recognized certain patterns: cars following her, sudden shifts in her security arrangements, and unexplained leaks to the media. Even within the legal proceedings, the coroner acknowledged that intelligence involvement had to be explored as a legitimate question. And while official conclusions dismissed every claim of a planned plot, people close to Diana never forgot how she herself had feared surveillance. She had once said she felt like someone was orchestrating things around her, and in hindsight,
They see me as a threat of some kind, and I'm here to do good. I'm not a destructive person.
Why do they see you as a threat?
I think every strong woman in history has had to walk down a similar path, and I think it's the strength that causes the confusion and the fear. Why is she strong? Where does she get it from? Where is she taking it? Where is she going to use it? Why do the public still support her? When I say public,
those words feel sharper than ever. The mother of a future king forming a bond with a man outside the establishment created anxiety in circles that valued control and image above all else. Those who believed in a conspiracy argued that intelligence services might have been watching her not to harm her, but to track the ripple effects of her choices. Yet even that explanation raised uncomfortable questions. If she was being monitored, why were there no records of it shown publicly? Why were certain testimonies dismissed quickly, while others sparked deeper confusion? Despite all official denials, the unanswered pieces kept the suspicions alive. Intelligence agencies insisted they had nothing to do with Diana's final night, but the lingering possibility, however small, continued to shape the public's perception. And as inquiries closed one by one, the sense that something was missing only grew stronger. In the end, the shadows of secret services became part of the mythology surrounding Diana's death, not proven, not disproven, just permanently rooted in the space where truth and secrecy collide. As the world tried to make sense of the crash, another group came under fire: the paparazzi. These were the men who had followed Diana for years, chasing her through streets, airports, beaches, and private moments she never truly owned. On the night of her death, they were once again right behind her, racing through Paris with cameras ready, determined to capture the most valuable photographs of their careers. When the crash happened, many of them poured into the tunnel, some trying to help, others taking pictures that would never see daylight. Those images, confiscated by French police in the hours after the tragedy, became a silent archive of a moment too painful to release. Their actions sparked global outrage. The public blamed them instantly, calling them vultures, monsters, the very hands that pushed Diana to her death. Yet investigations later concluded that while their pursuit created pressure and chaos, there was no evidence that they directly caused the crash. This left a bitter truth lingering in the air. They were not legally responsible, but morally, the world saw them as complicit. Still, the role of the photographers remains tangled in contradictions. Some of them claimed they reached the scene and immediately tried to help. Others admitted they kept filming, driven by instinct and career rather than compassion. Witness accounts from inside the tunnel described flashes going off while Diana was still alive, still breathing, still trapped. The idea that her last conscious moments may have been surrounded by strangers capturing her suffering is one of the darkest images tied to her legacy. The French authorities arrested 7 paparazzi that night, holding them in custody, questioning their motives and their behavior. But as the inquiries expanded, the legal system sided with evidence over emotion, clearing them of direct involvement. The moral debate, however, never ended. For many, the paparazzi symbolized the relentless pressure that had chased Diana for decades. They were the visible face of a machine that fed off her every move, her heartbreak, her joy, her vulnerability. On that night, their presence in the tunnel only deepened the tragedy. It felt as if the same world that adored her had cornered her in those final seconds. Whether they caused the crash or not, their role captured a deeper truth: that Diana lived and died under a spotlight she never asked for. And in the Alma Tunnel, the glare of that spotlight felt brighter, harsher, and more unforgiving than ever. Among the many questions that ignited after Diana's death, one rose louder than the rest. Was she pregnant? It was a rumor that spread with explosive speed, fueled by whispers from Paris, comments from Mohammed Al-Fayed, and a handful of photographs taken in the weeks before the crash. Some images showed what appeared to be a slight curve in her abdomen, sparking endless speculation that Diana might have been expecting a child with Dodi. For Al-Fayed, this was not speculation but certainty. He believed with absolute conviction that Diana was pregnant and that the royal establishment would never allow the mother of a future king to have a baby with his son. It became the emotional core of his belief that the crash was no accident. The inquest took these claims seriously. The coroner listed pregnancy as a key issue, examining medical reports, testimony from Diana's close friends, and statements from her doctor. The findings pointed in one direction. There was no medical evidence she was expecting. Friends who had spoken intimately with her in the days before the crash said she was not pregnant and was actively using birth control. Blood samples taken from the wreckage, once tested carefully, revealed results that aligned with her not carrying a child. Yet despite the scientific clarity, doubts lingered, mostly because the rumor carried emotional weight. It touched on love, motherhood, politics, and the fear Diana herself had expressed about being silenced. Then there was the ring. The simple gold band purchased that night became the centerpiece of engagement theories. Some said Dodi planned to propose that very evening. Others insisted it was simply a gift, not a symbol of an impending marriage. Witnesses offered conflicting accounts, adding to the fog. Did Diana know about the ring? Was she ready to accept it? Or was this moment still uncertain, still unfolding, still fragile? Even her closest friends seemed unsure. The ring, found locked in a Ritz safe, only deepened the mystery instead of clarifying it. The idea that Diana was pregnant or that she was about to marry Dodi mattered more than just gossip. It shaped the most powerful conspiracy theories surrounding her death. If she truly was about to take a step that threatened the image of the monarchy, then many believed it could serve as a motive for those who wanted to prevent it. Official inquiries denied all such possibilities. But for those who already believed Diana's life was filled with unseen dangers, the question of pregnancy became another puzzle that refused to fully settle. Whether fact or myth, the rumor clung to her story, shaping how millions viewed the tragedy and adding one more layer to a truth that remains elusive. The search for answers did not end in Paris. What followed was one of the longest, most expensive, and most contentious investigations in modern British history. The official process stretched across years, shaped by 4 different coroners, countless delays, legal battles, and political pressure that seemed to tighten around every step forward. The first coroner appointed to the case passed away before he could begin. The second brought in Lord Stevens, Britain's most senior police officer, to launch Operation Paget, a massive review of every rumor, claim, and piece of evidence connected to the crash. A third coroner, Lady Butler-Sloss, took over, but controversy erupted when she suggested holding the inquest without a jury and behind closed doors. Critics said this secrecy would only fuel conspiracy theories. The Court of Appeal agreed, insisting the proceedings must be public and decided by ordinary citizens. Lady Butler-Sloss stepped down, citing her lack of experience with juries. Only then did the fourth coroner, Lord Justice Scott Baker, step in and finally set the inquest in motion. By the time it opened, nearly a decade had passed since Diana's death. The inquest was tasked with addressing 20 major questions, from the role of the paparazzi to the condition of Henri Paul, the presence of a Fiat Uno, the mystery of the ring, the tunnel's emergency response, and whether Diana truly believed her life was in danger. Millions of pounds were spent gathering experts, witnesses, and evidence from France and the United Kingdom. The process was slow, heavy, and often emotionally charged. Yet despite the intensity, the goal was clear: give the public a transparent path to understanding what truly happened. Day after day, the court sifted through Diana's fears, Dodi's plans, eyewitness testimonies, and forensic reports. Each revelation added more layers to the puzzle, while still leaving room for doubt. On the outside, the public grew divided, some hoping for closure, others certain they would never get the whole truth. The inquest had become more than a legal requirement. It was a battleground between official findings and enduring suspicion. And with every passing week, it became clear that the truth, whatever it was, would not come easily. Inside Court 72 at the Royal Courts of Justice, the atmosphere was unlike any inquest Britain had ever witnessed. The jurors, 12 ordinary people, found themselves thrust into a global spotlight, asked to unravel one of the most emotionally loaded and politically sensitive tragedies of the century. Cameras followed them as they boarded coaches to Paris, where they walked through the Alma Tunnel themselves, an unprecedented step meant to anchor the case in physical reality. The moment they stood beneath the 13th pillar, the place where Diana's life ended, the weight of their responsibility became unmistakable. Back in London, the courtroom filled daily with lawyers, experts, witnesses, and observers, each carrying their own version of the truth. From intelligence officials to medical personnel, from eyewitnesses to hotel staff. Every voice added another shard to a mosaic that still refused to form a single, clear picture. The coroner laid out 20 core issues, turning the courtroom into a vast reconstruction of the night of the crash. Evidence was displayed on screens, CCTV clips of Diana and Dodi smiling in the Ritz, diagrams of the tunnel, chemical breakdowns of Henri Paul's blood samples, and testimonies from those who claimed Diana had confided fears of an orchestrated accident. Tension rose as contradictions surfaced. Experts disagreed on the speed of the Mercedes. Witnesses offered conflicting accounts of a white Fiat Uno, and questions lingered over discrepancies in investigative reports. Even Lord Stevens, whose own probe had concluded there was no conspiracy, faced scrutiny when it emerged that things he told Henri Paul as parents did not fully match the statements in his final report. For the jurors, every moment demanded careful judgment. They were warned repeatedly, ignore the tabloids, ignore rumors, ignore the pressure. But in a case involving a princess loved by millions and scrutinized for decades, detachment was nearly impossible. Each day presented new layers, some shedding light, others deepening the shadows. The jury was not there to confirm anyone's beliefs. They were there to weigh the facts and what lay between them. And as witnesses from both sides, official and deeply personal, stepped forward, it became clear that this was not just an inquest into a crash. It was an examination of power, fear, loyalty, and the fragility of truth. In Court 72, Diana's life, her warnings, her final hours, and the storm that followed were placed under a microscope. The jury's task was simple in law but overwhelming in reality. Decide what truly caused the crash that changed history. Outside the courtroom, the world washed with raw emotions that had never healed. Mohammed Al-Fayed, grieving father and fierce accuser, took every opportunity to voice what he believed was undeniable, that his son and Diana were murdered. His anger was not quiet. It was loud, direct, and aimed squarely at the establishment he felt had despised him for decades. He insisted that powerful forces could not allow a future king's mother to marry his son, nor accept the possibility of a child from their union. Each time he spoke, his words cut through the noise, shaking the media, provoking Parliament, and forcing the world to confront the darkest version of events. His pain translated into fury, and his fury became a driving force behind the inquest itself. Many believed that without him, the case would have been buried long ago. But outside of Al-Fayed's accusations, there was another collective voice, a quieter, softer one that begged for something far simpler: peace. Ordinary people who loved Diana felt torn. Some believed strongly in conspiracy, pointing to her warnings, her letter, the odd gaps in evidence. Others felt exhausted by years of speculation, convinced that the tragedy was just that, a tragedy. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Diana had lived a life full of pressure, heartbreak, and relentless intrusion. The idea that she couldn't be allowed to rest felt almost cruel. Crowds gathered outside the royal courts, some holding signs demanding truth, others carrying flowers in her memory, as if keeping vigil for a princess whose story refused to settle. Among Diana's friends, the mood was equally divided. Some argued she was targeted by those who disliked her independence and global influence. Others rejected the idea that anyone wanted her dead, insisting the crash was a mixture of bad timing, bad decisions, and bad luck. But all of them recognized how vulnerable she felt in her last years, how she often spoke about the dangers around her, how her instincts rarely failed, and how she feared a staged accident long before one happened. That knowledge made it difficult for many to accept the official narrative completely. In the middle of this storm stood a nation that still felt protective of her. Diana was not just a royal figure. She was a symbol. She represented empathy, vulnerability, strength, and rebellion. Her death had created a wound that never fully closed. And now, as the inquest peeled back layers of evidence and contradiction, old pain resurfaced. Some wanted justice. Some wanted closure. Some feared the truth would never be known. But all of them felt the weight of her loss, even a decade later. Whether they believed the inquest would uncover answers or simply stir more confusion, one thing was clear. Diana's story remained powerful enough to divide the world, shake the establishment, and ignite debates that refused to fade. As the inquest neared its end, the courtroom felt heavier, filled with years of grief, suspicion, and unanswered questions that refused to fit neatly into any single explanation. The official findings pointed toward a tragic convergence of factors: an unsafe plan, a speeding car, a driver whose blood test showed alcohol, and a chase triggered by relentless paparazzi. But even as these conclusions were read aloud, there was a sense that something deeper remained unresolved. Many of the 20 issues examined still carried shadows: the mysterious Fiat Uno that vanished without a trace, the conflicting accounts of Henri Paul's sobriety, the discrepancies in investigative statements, and the strange, intuitive certainty Diana had expressed about dying in a staged accident. None of these pieces were fully tied down. They simply coexisted, suspended in a space between fact and doubt. When the jury delivered its verdict, unlawful killing caused by the negligent driving of Henri Paul and the pursuing paparazzi, it was meant to bring closure. But for many, it didn't. The ruling acknowledged fault but avoided finality. It offered structure but not certainty. The theories, the fears, the coincidences, they were not erased, only filed away in a conclusion that felt both official and incomplete. Those who believed Diana was the victim of a broader plot saw the verdict as a partial truth, one that stopped short of confronting powerful institutions. Those who believed it was a tragic accident saw it as confirmation that the night was shaped by pressure and chaos rather than malice. And those who lived somewhere in between felt the weight of both worlds, believing the explanation, yet sensing it did not tell the whole story. The aftermath left the world divided but unified in one reality: the truth behind Diana's death would always feel unfinished. Too many people had too many pieces of a puzzle that never fully connected. Too many timelines had gaps. Too many testimonies contradicted each other. Too much depended on evidence that could never be recreated. And above all, Diana herself had feared the exact ending she met, giving her story an eerie, almost prophetic weight that no verdict could silence. As the inquest closed, the world was left with a mixture of answers and absences. The official narrative stood firm, but the questions lingered in whispers, in late-night conversations, in documentaries, in the minds of those who loved her. The truth may have been written into legal documents, but the fuller truth, the one Diana herself sensed, remained a quiet shadow over history. Impossible to prove, impossible to dismiss. In the end, after all the investigations, the headlines, the theories, and the verdicts, the story returns to Diana herself, the woman behind the conspiracies, the fears, the love, and the legacy. Beneath the mystery of her death was a life marked by extraordinary compassion and extraordinary loneliness. She was a princess who broke every mold, who reached out to the sick when others stepped back, who embraced the marginalized when the world turned away. Yet behind the public warmth was a private world filled with pressure, heartbreak, and a constant feeling of being watched by forces she never fully trusted. Her humor, her humanity, her vulnerability, all of it shone through even in her darkest moments. Friends recall how she joked about the rumors of her instability, how she confronted fear with wit, how she carried herself with grace even when she felt her life was spiraling towards something dangerous. Diana's instinct for looming danger wasn't the fantasy of a troubled woman. It was the intuition of someone who had lived too close to power for too long. When she said she didn't believe she would grow old, those words were dismissed as emotional exhaustion. When she confided that her life might be ended by an orchestrated accident, the warning was quietly filed away. But after the crash in the Alma Tunnel, her fears took on a new, chilling clarity. Whether those instincts pointed to an actual conspiracy or were shaped by years of emotional turmoil, they reveal a truth deeper than any investigation. Diana felt unsafe in the world she lived in. She felt exposed, unprotected, and fragile in the face of institutions far larger than herself. That reality, undeniable and emotional, continues to haunt the story of her final years. What makes Diana unforgettable is not the mystery of her death, but the spark she carried in life. She represented rebellion wrapped in kindness, trauma met with courage, and vulnerability transformed into connection. She broke protocols to hold hands with AIDS patients, used her voice to confront landmines, and used her empathy to reach millions who saw themselves reflected in her struggles. Even her flaws made her more human, more relatable, more real than any royal before or after her. And perhaps that is why the world refuses to let her story rest, because she was not just a princess, but a symbol of strength born from pain.